Everyone, it's me, Michael. Hopefully you got to or will get a chance to listen to my intro, but now I wanted to intro the series so you just understood a little bit more about what we're getting into. And I want to tell you a little bit about the seed of where the series came from. Um, my dissertation, my research work was around studying um, school leaders and their capacity to lead their schools in ways that led to greater justice and equity on campus. And what I found was that even people with the seemingly strongest values and commitments to justice can find ourselves reproducing the status quo. And so what I did was I listened to them when I just met with them one on one, and I did a discourse analysis of the way that leaders speak. Um, and then I compare that to the way that leaders or educators speak in other spaces, whether it's like a staff development or a team meeting. And I also analyze the documents they made that tell the story of the school. And what I saw was who they were as individuals, and their values and stories and commitments were often very different than the way that they spoke and led in spaces with other educators. And I think we all struggle with this. I think we all struggle with how to live and act in alignment with our greatest ideals and our strongest beliefs. Um, and so, what I'm showing you on the screen, what I'm sharing right now, is the frames that I've used to lead professional development across the country, um, with superintendents, with principals, with school leaders, with nonprofits. There's five circles. I call them rotas, um, which means wheel in Portuguese. The first one being leaders need to develop our capacity. Educators must develop our capacity. And by the way, we're all leaders. Leading is just the capacity to live in alignment with our values. At least that's how I think of it about it. So the first circle you'll see here is centered, that we talk a lot about. How do we find ways to show up as our fullest selves and even to know who we are as our fullest selves? And then how do we create spaces where other people can do the same, whether that's our colleagues or our young people? The second thing is, how do we recognize that our relationships are really impactful, and each relationship has an opportunity to make the world a better place? But that ultimately, as educators and leaders, the only way we lead change or we create change is through our relationships. Um, Great documents and great practices and great policies make a great difference, but it's the relationships that make those changes last, and really accelerates change. So that's the second one, transformative, that we are transformative leaders. The third one you'll see here is complexity. In my research, what I found was when leaders at times faced a complex moment or a moment of tension, we often find ways to simplify things or to try to go around the discomfort. And so our own ability to lead through complexity is necessary if we're going to talk about racial justice and moving towards more racial justice. So that's the third rota, complexity. The fourth one, in my research, I found, in my own experiences, I found that if we don't recognize the social, historical, and political context of the spaces and places and communities that we serve, then we likely are going to harm people, or we're going to make decisions that are not rooted in the context that we serve. So great leaders, great educators who are fighting for racial justice must understand their positionality and the context of the communities they serve in. And lastly, the only way to make this all happen, so we don't contort ourselves in different places, is that we have to build systems and routines and procedures and relationships that allow for our actions and our decisions and our words to align. And so that's the last circle, which is coherence. So I was asked to just use these frames, or to use my research to think specifically around how to develop the capacity of educators and leaders to become better leaders for racial justice, or to develop our racial literacy. And so I built a 6-session series using those circles, but also referencing tons of geniuses like Dr. Sean Ginwright, Bettina Love, Goldie Muhammad, Yolanda Celia Ruiz, Bell Hooks, Paulo Freire. I can go on and on all the folks that I'll reference in the series, but it's essentially a 6-series session. We meet once a month. We invest time in really getting to know each other and creating safe spaces in the digital on the Zoom platform. But we'll move through the circles with specific essential questions that are focused on racial literacy and racial equity. And so the first session you'll see is about how do we How do we recognizing how our identities shape our leadership? And if you clicked in this doc, you'll be able to look at all the slides from that session. You're welcome to check them all out. Session 2 moves us towards how do we understand, um, how does our understanding of historic and systemic racism inform our leadership? That gets to that part of situated leadership. Session 3 is around how we can remain centered and rooted in our core values. Um, so that's like, how do we actually act and show up in alignment with our values and build our relationships around our values and our understandings. Um, we move to going back to really understanding the social and political context of your specific spaces that you work in. So whether it's your school community or the city at large, that takes us into zooming into the situated nature around your school. Session 5 is when we talk about complexity and how we can leverage complexity to build stronger communities, especially across differences of identity, differences of beliefs and ideologies. That we have to figure out how to lead through those times. And lastly, we end with, like you could guess, the coherence. Like, how do we put this all together, and how do we build a plan to sustain our leadership for social justice in our schools and racial justice in our schools? So those are the 6 sessions. You're welcome to check out all those slides. I hope you do. They're linked in the doc, which you all have access to. This document also takes you through some of the key frameworks, like I discussed, Dr. Celie Ruiz's work, some of my dissertation frames about positionality and leadership. I use a lot of frames from the National Equity Project. The 7 Circle model is one of my favorites, and really having a conversation about systemic oppression, and have a frame that we'll reflect on around transactional versus transformative ways of being with each other. There's also great work coming out of the website called Divorcing White Supremacy Culture. More NEP work. The point is, we'll have a lot of tools. We'll have a lot of conversations, and we'll have a lot of opportunities to just talk about how to become leaders for racial justice in our classrooms and our schools. And I hope you check it out. We'll have space for about 20 people. So don't hesitate. Click the link or scan the QR code to show your interest so we can get things rolling. I appreciate you all. Have a great day.